In the heart of the state-of-the-art, at the dawn of the next stage in entertainment, you found No Proscenium.
You have indeed found No Proscenium, the voice of everything immersive. I'm Noah Nelson, and welcome to episode 438 of our ongoing exploration of the immersive cosmos. This week on the show, Michael Epstein, founder of Walking Cinema, is with us to talk about the Fillmore Eclipse, the first immersive theater piece from his company, which has been making immersive work for years now. We'll unpack that as we get into the hows and whys of the show, which has just extended its run in San Francisco and explores the history of San Francisco's legendary Fillmore jazz scene, a mid-20th century phenomenon that was fueled by Black prosperity only to be destroyed by redevelopment policies handed down from SF's City Hall. And yet, elements of it still endure. Before we get into the interview, a few quick beats from around the cosmos, starting with word that tickets for Life and Trust, the mysterious new show from Immersive, the long-running presenters of Sleep No More in New York, have gone on sale ahead of a June launch. The fan scene and No Pro's team Slack in New York has been abuzz this week about just what the heck is going on behind the scenes at an odd cafe that has popped up in New York City's financial district. Also on sale, tickets for the Hollywood Fringe, which is once again bringing a slate of eclectic experiments to Los Angeles. Check the show notes for links to both events. Last but not least, coming up on May 18th, we are hosting the world premiere of Siobhan O'Loughlin's Broken Bone Bathtub, the documentary, chronicling her last pre-pandemic tour of her one-woman show that took place in donated bathrooms across the United States. That's happening at Thymele Arts in Hollywood, complete with a Q&A and a mixer afterwards. Tickets are just $25, and No Pro backers get a $5 discount. This is our next immersive meetup in LA, and I hope to see you all there. And now, this is usually the part where I thank the latest Patreon backers, but I'm recording this during a Spectrum outage, and the Patreon mobile app sucks for looking up information, like the names of the last few people to join. So while I know that we have some, I've seen you pop up. I also know I'll miss some of you if I just try to piece it together via email, and then I'll mess up even worse next week. So if you joined in the last week and expected to hear your name in the shoutouts now, I'm sorry. Hopefully Spectrum will be back up and running in time to get the newsletter together, and I'll get to shout you out next week. We now stand at I don't know how many backers away from the magical 450 paid backer mark. Let's see if we can get there this month so I can take June off from shilling here on the pod. Now, if your internet is working and you're not a backer yet, help us close the deal here and keep me from stocking shelves in an Amazon warehouse this summer by heading over to patreon.com/noproscenium. You think I'm joking. I wish I wasn't. Not only do backers get the newsletter and access to our Discord, but they also get early access and discounts to our events, plus the knowledge that I won't go replacing the Aesop hand soap with Irish Spring. That and the fact that the cost of a tall Frappuccino a month is enough to keep an independent media operation from disappearing into the ether if everyone who relies on it were to chip in. As always, big thanks to our sustaining backers, Samuel Mystery, Chris Woolman, Samantha Davison, Eric Shamlin, Elaine, Daryl, John Boulette, Cameo Wood, Tom Wilson, Jay Bushman, Jerome Joseph Gentis, Kurt Collins, Ryan, David Bassick, Richard Ayers, Lonnie Hanson, Lecker LaCool, the Ministry of Peculiarities, and Jan Budman. I can't do all that on one breath anymore. The list has gotten long enough, or my lungs have gotten weak enough. We're also on the lookout for community partners who are up for working out special deals for our backers. Hit me up at noah@noproscenium.com for details. Let's get into this week's interview, and then I'll come back and chat for a bit, because this was a tight one. Here we go. Joining us now is Michael Epstein of Walking Cinema to talk with us about the freshly extended The Fillmore Eclipse, of which the San Francisco Chronicle has said, as part of the crowd, you feel part of a dangerous electric throng. Anything could happen. While Walking Cinema is well known for their intricate audio based walking history experiences, this is their first fully staged immersive performance based experience, one that, like all of their work, taps into the local history of the setting. Michael, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, Noah.
So to get us started, tell us about the Fillmore Eclipse.
Sure. The Fillmore Eclipse is an immersive theater production set and staged in the Fillmore neighborhood of San Francisco. Um, it basically recreates a 1950s underground jazz club, of which there were 24 in the mid 50s in this particular neighborhood of San Francisco. It was really an incredible, unique setting. They said, basically you could go out on a Friday night and jump from jazz club to jazz club for 48 hours. And nothing would close. It roared all night. And, underlying that incredible jazz scene was also quite a bit of Black wealth that built up along this jazz corridor. These were all Black owned businesses, both male and female. And through urban policy, mostly urban renewal, a lot of that wealth got erased in a matter of a few years. And so the show is set in one of those clubs on the night before it closes due to the bulldozers coming in.
When you say, focusing just on the experience for a second, because I do want to get into the story, and as someone who grew up in the Bay Area, the Fillmore, like some of my earliest memories of when we moved to the Bay Area in the 80s, were that there were still sort of parts of the Fillmore that were a little bit contested, that hadn't been, quote unquote, renewed entirely yet. So there were still pockets of the folks who had been in the neighborhood since before the 50s who were then still being pushed out. And this was something that was repeated a couple of times around San Francisco proper. So I definitely want to drill into that, into like who the team is that's making this and telling the story. But focusing on sort of the audience questions at the moment, when you say recreates like the night before one of these clubs is closed down and what it would be like, what do you mean by that? What is the experience for the audience being in there when you saying recreating a jazz club? I mean, how much of a recreation is it? What are they getting while being
Yeah,
there?
well, it's pretty damn close. It's designed after a specific club that was in the lower level of Victorian. So we're talking, a single room that's about 25 feet across, 100 feet deep. It's, like most Victorians, got those like shop front windows on it. The reason I know all this is that building still exists. It's actually around the corner from the building that we're in. So it's all like very, very close geographically and set wise to what one of these clubs would have looked like. And when you walk in, you see a mix of period furniture, and a lot of details. There's an old cash register, there's an old radio, there's objects that feel like they could be from that era. But mixed in are some pieces that are from now. And one of the most prominent are photographs going along the walls that were shot in these clubs in the 1950s. And those photographs are, first of all, incredible to look at because they capture so much of what the scene looked and felt like. But they're also cluing the audience to, like, we're not just in then. We're also looking at then from the point of view of now. And contemplate about, well, what did that mean? And the photographs themselves become a big part of the story, especially in the second act as the characters are packing up. The atmosphere is electric. There's a live band playing. There's an active bar with period cocktails.
There's a live band is what I was looking for most of
There
all,
we go.
right?
I got that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
The band is playing. Yeah.
and that, you talk about like 25 feet across, 100 feet deep, and that doesn't sound like a lot of space on one hand, but if you know the San Francisco music scene, like there are so many spots all over the city that are, or at least were before I left, that were still just like that, and you can pack a lot of people into a space that
That's
small.
right. That's right.
Yeah.
We cap our audience at 50, which is still pretty intimate for the
Yeah.
crowd. And yeah, there's certain areas, like we use some outdoor spaces for certain scenes, but most of the scenes happen in and around this 25 by 100-foot area. The actors are mingling amongst you for most of the show. Sometimes it's small interactions with groups, and sometimes it's actually having scenes where they're really spotlit. And then the band is also a character. Both the music they're playing and the band leader himself is a character, Sonny. And they're all interacting with the story.
And it's playing out like in a single linear time. So it's kind of like, is it sort of sandboxy, or is the audience sort of kind of free to roam around, or do things kind of break off into different tracks? What's the narrative
It's
structure here?
pretty much one track set linearly. Um, Audiences aren't moving that much. There are certain scenes, like I said, outside where we're seeing audiences move towards a window to catch that
Mm.
one. Generally, audiences are seated and actors are coming to them for these smaller side conversations.
Now, walking cinema has largely worked in audio form, right? It's almost even there in the name a bit, like the walking part at least. Like there's these walking tours that you've
Mhm.
staged, not just in the Bay Area, but other places as well. I think you even have one actively going right now. What in where in the world?
We have a
It's-
production in DC.
right.
Did like 7 in Rome. We did projects in Venice, Italy.
Yeah. So like
Done a lot of
all,
different ones.
all over the place. Why branch out into immersive theater for this particular story?
Yeah, when I started doing the walking audio about 20 years ago, I thought it was really cool to like hijack public spaces and turn them into stages for storytelling. Some of it being just pure audio, conjuring up a scene in front of you, but more and more we've used augmented reality to complement the audio storytelling. So you're literally like seeing scenes from the past come alive around you through your phone's camera. But it always felt like spatially we didn't have like total control, and we didn't
Mm.
really have like a space of our own. It was always this kind of hijacking or borrowing a shelf at a gift shop, or having the owner of a lobby give you a door code to get in so you could see these paintings that were in the lobby. I mean, it was all sort of like, it was cool in the way that we were sort of trying to leverage public and semi-private spaces to tell our stories. But more and more I was interested in like that feeling of having a space of your own where you could just build it out to tell the story, and that joy of like very intricately staging and choreographing a story within a space has been like amazing for me. So yeah, and I always like immersive. I
Yeah.
went to Sleep No More when it started in Boston in I think 2007. So I was like an early like entrant into that world, and I was like, oh yeah, this is cool. I want something like this. Yeah.
How do you have to? How do you have to? I'm gonna retake that question. Don't like how it's straight. What kind of team did you assemble to make a fully fledged immersive theater piece? It's
Yeah.
different than making a location based augmented reality
Totally.
audio driven affair.
Yeah. So I had done collaborations with screenwriters, poets, other creatives to create my scripts. But this one was a lot more formal, hiring a playwright and a director. Michael French was the director of this. He had done years of work with the Speakeasy in San Francisco, so he knew immersive really well. And he actually entered not just as a director, but as a creator, a sort of story by credit for him. And he started working with me and the writer for a few months. But then, one of the key entrants into the story was the space itself, and Erica, oh my God, I'm forgetting Erica's last name now. The executive director of the space, Erica Scott, really helped like seal the team, and it was because she had a small space that I've already described right in the middle of the Fillmore, where she was running some after school programs, some community meetings, But on her walls, she had 30 of these photographs. And in the window, it said the Harlem of the West, which was the name of the neighborhood in the 1950s. And I walked by that storefront and I was like, what? This is exactly the story we're telling. And I went inside and I talked with Erica, and I think she thought either I was crazy or this was like an incredible coincidence that I was doing a whole immersive theater show about exactly the exhibit she had in her gallery. And and she got on board like 100%, not just to like sublet the space to us to allow us to do the show there, but to completely redecorate, to paint all the walls, to paint the awning, to completely convert it into a club indefinitely. That's another unique thing that's going on with this show is like we don't have to strike. When
Mm.
it's done, we don't have to pack up. It's still there. It's ready. We have the opportunity to remount and remount in the same place. And she also did an incredible amount of outreach to the neighborhood. These are like African American, Japanese American school groups, retirement homes, um, people who knew this history. She's gotten together a couple of community dialogue sessions to help inform the show, in which one woman who's 95 remembered going to these clubs and was able to describe to us in intricate detail what it was like to be there. So that community connection that we were looking for in the show really like came through that connection to Erica.
That process you're talking about, it makes me think about kind of the responsibility when you're being kind of a living historian to reflect the reality of the lives of the people who live that history. So, what's your approach there when crafting one of these narratives, be it for one of the walking tours or in this case for this living show, to get those stakeholders involved and
Yeah.
incorporate their perspective?
Yeah. I mean, to be honest about this, and I hear this a lot in media productions, is like there's this term, the community, and it's kind of code for, in this case, like the African American community that, is sort of the headline of what happened with redevelopment. And it was mostly African Americans who were kicked out and had to move. But in the 50s, the Fillmore was actually pretty diverse. And so you also had a Japanese American community there that is still remaining in the neighborhood, but pretty small. Same with the African American community. So one of the problems is, do you go to just who's left in the neighborhood as the stakeholders, right? Or do you go to the diaspora that may be way out in the exurbs now, or way out all the way across the United States, and involve them? And I think the answer for us was it's some of both. We're both working with Erica, we were able to reach out to both local groups and people that were in this kind of extended family, because she had spent years after growing up in the neighborhood keeping those connections alive. But also, it was like in the writing where, through our research, with dramaturg Elizabeth Pepin Silva, who wrote the book, The Harlem of the West, we were able to get a Japanese American perspective on it through a young woman, Paula, who's a character. And then we also got a true story of a longtime record store owner in the neighborhood, who was Jewish. And then also these perspectives of an activist who, really, for the first time in San Francisco's history, you get a really concentrated effort, mostly among the African American community, to organize and actually fight government policy, which was a pretty new thing back at that time period, but also the business perspective. And this was based on a man named Charles Sullivan, who owned the Fillmore Auditorium, had the master lease on it, I should say. And he was African American, but he represented a very business minded view of what the future of the African American community should be. So for us, it was really important to have a kind of mix in the room. And what we found is a lot of folks who knew that history really well from one perspective come to the show and they're like, oh, I didn't know that other perspective. And for
Mm.
me, that's kind of the big win. And there's some people who never knew anything about any of this. And they're walking. One woman was like, I think in her 30s, African American. She said she grew up in Oakland, and she said she always thought of San Francisco as not having any black people. The story for her was a revelation of
Yeah.
like, what? There were
Yeah.
a bunch of black folks in San Francisco at one time, and it's just it's incredible, to see when you start pulling apart a history and presenting it to people. Everybody's going to come away with different pieces that are new to them.
Yeah, and that shift. You think you just said that one was in her 30s, right? And so
Hmm.
just a 20-year shift is enough to like alter the perception fully because there were plenty of black folk in San Francisco in like the 80s when I was,
Hmm.
but it was that last wave of folks being pushed out. It was like from the 50s to the 80s. There was this like long history, but a lot of it does feel like it is at this point historical. So
Hmm.
why tell this story right now?
There's like the standard answer of like, to understand where we're going, we have to look where we came from, all these arguments for it. But this is still very contemporary. There is still, I'd say probably the number one question in San Francisco now is about some form of displacement, meaning where do homeless people go? Do we just move them out? If so, where do we push them to? And this is a story of a massive initial displacement of 27,000 people. It also gets at the roots of why African Americans feel disenfranchised. There was federal policy that basically established that a blighted neighborhood could be defined by a concentration of minorities. And minorities didn't mean white people of a certain ethnicity or Italians or anything like that. It meant African Americans mostly. There were
Hmm.
also racial covenants that didn't allow African Americans to live in most neighborhoods in San Francisco. And so when you really get into it, you really wonder, where did the black folks go? You got to go back to this. And then secondly, San Francisco is ground zero for our national discussion of reparations. And the business side of the story of losing a club, of this one character who's kind of constantly got to stay ahead of the game because he's being pushed around, and the enormous black wealth that's being lost uh, as this policy sets in place in the one neighborhood where they were thriving, helps us look at reparations now as like, okay, wait a minute, there's something pretty real and even quantifiable behind that movement. So yeah, in those senses, it's still very contemporary. And it's also contemporary in that a lot of these folks, when they come to the show, these are things they don't forget. Japanese American internment was only 80 years ago. That we rounded up a specific ethnicity and we put them in camps in Arkansas, in Nevada. It's crazy that was only 80 years ago. And with Trump potentially being president again, that conversation of how we round people up and where do we put them, it's very much now.
Yeah, there's a real sense of deja vu all over again, a real sense of particularly of the generation that fought through World War II, that lived through the 40s and the 50s, and that massive change and all the horrors that were visited upon people, and the reaction that came to that in the 60s and into the 70s, that that's so far behind us that it's out of living memory for a lot of folks, and we're like right back into the same patterns,
Mm-hmm.
as if every two generations they have to relearn the same damn lessons, which is incredibly stressful. um, I laugh because otherwise I'd scream, but that's one of the things that you know theater makers, filmmakers, are kind of called upon to do, to remember for everybody else what has happened and try and bring that to life in a really cogent way. Um, what's been the reaction so far? Slash, once you got an audience in there, this is actually the better version of the question. I suppose it's like, oh, what's the reaction so far? Great, everyone loves it. Um, once you got the audience in there, what did you start finding that you kind of needed to like shave off or
Yeah.
move around or start to massage to make it really sing?
Um, so I just invented this name for it, but I'm going to call it tone drop. I don't
Hmm.
know if you've ever experienced that, but it's this story where initially it's super up. So last night, folks, let's have a great time. You know, the band's playing, drinks are flowing, people are feeling this like high energy. And then, still pretty high energy, an activist comes up to stage and basically says they're trying to kick black folks out of the neighborhood. We need to use this moment to organize. And then for like 10 or 15 minutes, there's this kind of tension in the room between, wait, am I watching something that's a tragedy where there's like a lot of heavy, sad shit being thrown at me? Or am I still supposed to be like saying, like, yeah, cheers, good time, you know, like, and
Hmm.
so we put the audience, because the audience are active players in the situation, in a really awkward position. And I felt like this tone drop in the room. Like, I just feel like people aren't sure what's going on. And as you can tell, the Chronicle found that exciting to a certain degree. But I think for the first few runs, we didn't know how to handle that.
Hmm.
You know, that sucking of energy, that sort of drop in energy, and where to take that and how to hold it. And what I found was this kind of couple more rehearsals, a couple more like talking through it, a more activation of, we have really four actors circulating through the room and allowing them to kind of also react to this shift in energy. Um, Fixed it, you know, like made it all of a sudden, made the audience feel like you're in a weird space right now. We get that,
Right.
but we want you to hold both of those feelings right now. The music is kind of keeping you a little bit up and driving it forward. The characters are sort of dropping both a sense of hope and tragedy on you, but we're sort of keeping those two feelings going. And it's like, we were talking about it last night. It's like a high wire act, you know, and you just gotta have a right balance and tone for it not to feel just like, you know, record scratch.
Yeah. Holding it in tension, right? Like tension's
Yeah.
what makes drama, and
And
it
owning that it's sad. You know, I think there's
yeah.
a pressure often in, especially immersive, to like have a good time and did you get enough action? And this one's gonna like hit you in other places because it's, one audience member called it doubly immersive. Like you're immersed while you're in the show, and then you step outside the door and you realize it's all still there. You know, the places that are
Yeah.
mentioned, the events that happen, it's still in that neighborhood.
Something you said there when you were talking about, finding a way to hold onto it through rehearsals and like having it be the character circulating through, right? And kind of signaling, you didn't say this, but like I kind of heard it, signaling to the audience that it's okay that it's uncomfortable, like
Mhm.
letting folks know that, largely probably through the way that the characters themselves are reacting to what's happening. And like that does the job of not alienating the audience from the moment by letting them, see that with the people who are inhabiting that world,
Yes.
that that's the moment for them as well. It's like, yeah, this is awkward, this is strange, this is tense, like we can live here together. I'm not here standing here being like, oh, shouldn't you think it's funny this is happening? It's like,
Yeah.
no, like I'm right there with you. And that sense of inclusion is what the audience is always chasing, whether they know it or not. That's why they came to be at something that's promising to be immersive. They want to be included, and the routes to that are multifarious. Um, you mentioned, because you guys did just get an extension, you mentioned that you don't have to strike. So, what is sort of the plan here? Is the hope that it's like you build and build and you just keep on kind of doing indefinite extension, or do you have? You may also mention the remount
Yeah.
word is the idea of like have a solid run, fall back, think of another solid run later down the road.
Yeah.
What's percolating in your mind at the moment?
I think, you know, we've added four shows over Memorial Day weekend. Um, it is kind of a magic after that to get the band and the actors and the extras and all that together to do another run. But I do see us, you know, in the same space doing it again several times over at least the next year. But what's honestly most exciting for me about this story is that redevelopment did a doozy in most American cities in the 50s and 60s. This story is Cleveland, Detroit, Chicago, Atlanta, New York City. Um, Same idea. Where are we going to strike first? Where are we going to try to clear out the slums? Oh, black neighborhood. What was going on in black neighborhoods in the 50s and 60s? In most places, there was a cultural surgence, even a wealth surgence going on. And so it's exciting for me to have this highly site specific story that can be slightly rewritten and resituated in many cities and tell the story of other neighborhoods that went through similar experiences in the 50s and 60s. Some of the ethnicities might change. The Japanese American story is very particular to San Francisco. So some characters might need to shift in their backstory, but I think that's part of the excitement of trying to mount it in other cities.
All right. Well, Michael, thank you for coming through and telling us what's up with the current run of the Fillmore
Sure.
Eclipse. And as you mentioned, got that extension through Memorial Day, and we'll see how long this particular run. And yeah, the band probably being the hardest part of all of managing all the schedules, but
Yeah, totally.
yeah.
Totally. But yeah, it's been incredibly rewarding. We were very lucky to have this convergence of talent, of the space that we got, of the community that supported it. Like, it's sold out. I did not expect it to sell out as quickly as it did. And to show, I'd say one other thing we've seen in this that folks who've done immersive for years haven't seen is the audience that's coming is from all walks of life. We have folks that are older, African American, your typical, white older audiences that go to theater in the Bay Area, but then we're seeing a lot of young folks coming too, of all ethnicities, and it's really exciting to see that kind of mix in the room. And I'd say the last thing I'd add about the production that has worked out beyond my wildest dreams is this idea of a third act. After the show ends, we invite folks to stay for a half hour, have a drink, and talk to somebody, that's not in their group. And it's happening. It's crazy. They want to stay. They want to hang out. They don't want to leave. And they're making these kind of
Nice.
cross bubble connections, you could call it. And that can only happen, I think, one, by going into physical space, not watching, digital media or doing a walking tour, even though our walking tours do try to create experiences for groups. But, secondly, immersive is so good at that. By breaking those barriers between actor and audience, all of a sudden, audience feels like they can reach over and talk to folks next to them.
Yeah, you've got people warmed up all night by talking to paid professional talkers, and then they're ready to talk to people who aren't paid professional talkers. And that idea of, they're given the social permission to go ahead and do that. They're given a topic, the show they just saw and everything was about. So the ice is fully broken. They're a little bit lubricated from the drinks. And then the other thing, by having an audience size that's only about 50, that's manageable. That's like the size of like 2.5 large dinner parties. It's not like I don't know where to go, prom's too big. It's like, like you can read a room of 50 people a lot easier than you can read a room of like 150 people. So really, really nifty format you landed on there for that
Well, if you
particular
get a
purpose.
sec, you've got a seat at the Eclipse. Memorial Day weekend, if you can make it.
Nice. Well, Michael, thanks for stopping by the show, and we'll talk
Thanks,
again
John.
soon.
All right. Bye.
Once again, I want to thank Michael for being our guest on the show this week. Check the show notes for the links to both Walking Cinema and the Fillmore Eclipse. like I said, this was kind of a tight episode this week. Part of that was because I was expecting this to be a double header, and then for reasons it wound up not being a double header. The other part of this episode will ultimately air. It's not about this though; it's about something else. There's also a bunch more recordings. I recorded 3 interviews on Wednesday. And next week's interview is going to be with Agenta McDaniels of Blue 13 Dance Company. They're the folks who made Shadi in 2021 at Heritage Square Museum here in LA, which was this wonderful, wonderful dance piece that used the Heritage Square Museum brilliantly. They're back at the Heritage Square Museum with a piece called Soliloquy, which I am told is going to be very different from Shadi, but equally exciting. And we had just a fantastic conversation, and I'm really looking forward to getting that one out to you all. And they're doing that over, I think, not Memorial Day weekend. They're doing it over the last weekend of the month, because Memorial Day this time is not the last weekend of May, which is always weird when it isn't, right? You get that period of time, always weird years. I don't like it. I don't like it when it's not that way. So it's like it rolls into June and suddenly it's just weird. It's just weird. Anyway, because it's like partially, or maybe it is the last. Maybe it's anyway. Just quiet, Nelson. Go look at the calendar. Actually, look at the calendar now. Now I'm bugging myself. I'm like, wait, am I wrong? Okay, so it's one of those weird things. So it's the 31st, 1st, and the 2nd, because it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So like the weekend is the first weekend in June, but the Friday is the last Friday in May. And then you want it to be Memorial Day weekend because it's like, anyway. So, hi. You can tell 2 things. One, that I was out late because you can hear it, like, it's not gravel. There's just like a little something in my voice. So I was out late last night and talking. Shocker. And then you can also hear probably a bit of a pep in my voice because yesterday was my mom was having a good day at the nursing home recovery center setup. Will that be true today? Don't know. Haven't gone yet. Haven't seen. Don't know. My mood is fluctuating greatly based on her condition. Yeah, that's a thing. So, and again, I don't want to get into it, but I've got enough energy to blather some more. So, and it's an exciting moment. He was like, "Oh no, let's talk about it's an exciting moment for immersive again. Oh, he's such a shell." No, things are interesting right now because last year was so I don't want to say nightmarish, but like the cycle of news was like consistently depressing because it was like the burnt city's closing, Sleep No More is closing. Is Sleep No More closing? It's gonna close. It's gonna close. They're gonna hold on as long as they can, but everything we understand. The shipboard scuttlebutt is that like the lease is up, and like when a lease is up, a lease is up. Um, and Star Cruiser, of course, which is like a whole nother kettle of fish. And there are people who like to dance on the grave of Star Cruiser, and like I like to, teach them where the airlocks are. Anyway, the a lesson you only get to learn once. You only need to learn it once. What was I saying? Oh, right. Sorry. I haven't had coffee yet, so the filter's not in. You think that coffee is to protect me? No, it's to protect you. The news this season, as we turn spring into summer, as we around the corner, is of all the things that are opening. It's a time of renewal, because live entertainment is about shows opening and closing, and then another show opens. That's the way it goes. And then once in a while, there are these weird anomalous freaks that stick around forever, like Xavier and his mutants. No, speaking of which, you've probably all noticed, and I'll throw in a link here. Not that they need the help. Sometimes you wonder, like, Noah, why aren't you talking about Airbnb's icons and like the X Mansion? Well, I'm about to right now, which is why I made the Xavier joke. But also because, like, who needs the help of a little indie broadcaster more? Um, a bunch of people taking a gamble on a immersive theater piece in the financial district of Wall Street, in New York. A bunch of people making a living history piece in San Francisco. Folks doing work at the Hollywood Fringe, or one of the largest companies in the country, right? Well, but you cover Disney stuff. I was like, yeah, we do, because we also want to, get an audience for that stuff. Don't you understand? This is all like a shell game. You come for one thing, you stay for another. Uh, see, I told you, the coffee's to protect you. Um, Airbnb has done something brilliant, which is they went into Westchester County, found a house that has like a kind of a resemblance to the X Mansion from the '90s cartoon version of the X-Men, which is back because it is, and it's awesome. It's better than it was in the '90s, because I don't know if you tried to watch that thing, but like, good God, the animation's terrible. The old one, not the current one. The current one, the animation is gorgeous. Um, so they took over this house and they unleashed an artist into basically cell shade paint the entire house to look like a cartoon. It is amazing. It is brilliant. They've got like an experience built into it. They call it icons. It's fantastic. Okay. I don't know what I'm talking about this other than the joke, but it is one of these things. Oh, right. It's the season of renewal. It's one of the things that's happening right now. Life and trust. I probably wouldn't have talked about life and trust this week in the open and not now. In part because of everything that's going on, Mom, I have not been following up so much, and and also some people keep on saying like, oh hey, like they're gonna reach out to you, and I'm like, okay, and then they haven't reached out to us. So I'm like, all right, I got stuff going on. I can't go chasing everybody. But the team, I'm standing in the hallway of the nursing home yesterday, waiting for someone's diaper to get changed, and because that's my life now, and I'm scrolling through the Slack, and like there must have been like 25 screens worth of a conversation that had started at 8 o'clock in the morning LA time, and I was like 1:30, while I was waiting for the nurses to deal with my mom's roommate, and give the people some dignity. And uh, I was like, my God. And it was actually like, we're going to get them to come on the pod, because it was this wild conversation, not wild, but it was this fantastic conversation, not only about like lots of rampant speculation about what the show might be based on the available like evidence that's around, but also like, well, do we even need something like that? Or what, I don't want to spoil it, because like that's for them to do. I just want to like bring a bunch of the folks on the show and like sit back and watch. But it was incredible how excited everyone was to have the promise of something that is like a meaty, probably repeatable experience. And that is really encouraging to see. And then, we've got Particle Inc. having just opened in Vegas. Todd Martin's our friend over at the LA Times just wrote a piece saying it's like, a Sleep No More for the next generation. One of the bits in the piece, which I haven't read, but Catherine called out, because everyone else has time to read and I don't, is they've got a lease, I guess, at the Luxor for 4 years. So they're committed to a 4-year run right now. Now, not to be, a nattering Bob, but stuff happens. But the other part about particularly Vegas, the wisdom that was handed down to me from someone who's facing an opening of their own, not Park Link, but some other folks, was that, it can take months before something takes off in Vegas, and you just got to build that into your run, your plans, because it's a very crowded market. And indeed, like I think like the biggest show in Vegas was, it took like a year before it got to be sold out, and then it was like sold out forever. So, but the start looks to be pretty promising, and the buzz is high, and we're at a moment again. Of course, last week the announcement that Yawolf's targeted Los Angeles for their sixth exhibition. Um, we're in a a a spring again. And I think what's really great and what excites me about this particular moment is that it's really easy, if you're a creator, if you're one of the OG fans, if you're on the scene and you're looking around and you're watching the big swings, and the legends fold, to say, this was a moment and this is over. Watching everything pop up right now, watching the next phase, the next stage. uh, look for news on that next week. Uh, watching that happen, watching this moment happen, should be the evidence that you can let go of the anxiety that this is a passing fad and embrace the reality that immersive is here to stay, that this is a practice, that this is a for some people it is a vertical in their portfolio, for other people it's a way of life, for a lot of creators it is core to their practice, and most importantly, for a lot of the audience, for a lot of fans, it is core to their tastes. It is what they want. And that grows. It doesn't go away. Now, does it mean that there won't be generational fluctuations and things get hot and things get cold and things are cool and things, uh, things aren't seen as like as nifty? Of course, business cycles. Nothing is forever. There are dips. That's the way of it. Starlight Express flamed out. Phantom of the Opera closed after a very long time. One day, Hamilton won't be on Broadway. Someone just had a heart attack when I said that. I'm sorry, and I can't pick up the bill. But it's too late now to put this back in the box, and everyone who's taking a swing right now and finding critical success and then finding commercial success, or just getting these massive pops when they announce something like the X Mansion, uh, goes to show that we have passed through the veil into the magic circle and just happened. Oh no, they heard the robot in my voice. All is over. Sorry. I really haven't had the coffee yet. Uh, you know what I'm trying to say. We're here. We're not going anywhere, and that's really really wonderful. Um, any any single show, any single venue, any single experience can't take all of this away if it goes under. That's what I've been trying to formulate for the past 15 minutes, but also for the past 15 months. Um, and that makes me feel really good about my life choice. And I hope it makes you feel good about your life choices too. Thank you for spending some of your incredibly valuable time with me in this ongoing parasocial relationship we have, or in some cases, some actual social relationships that we have. Let's do the credits. The associate producer of No Proscenium is Parker Sella. Music for No Proscenium is by Chris Porter of the Speakeasy Society and Solar the Podcast. Special thanks to Siobhan O'Loughlin for voicing our intro. This monstrosity is my fault. I'm Noah Nelson. And until next time, I'll see you at the show.